Hello, guys. Thanks for joining us today again. Today we will be talking about Liquibase. It's a really great tool that helps you work with the database, and on many modern projects, it's an integral part that's used by default without thinking. Today's speaker is Donatas. He will tell us everything that we should know about this great tool. And before passing the word to him, I remind you that you can ask all your questions in the chat. We will try to answer all of them, maybe in the middle, maybe in the end of the light talk. And don't forget to press your likes and subscribe to our channel if you like the video. And with that, I'm passing the word to you, Donatas.
As you can see, the topic is Liquibase. And a little bit about myself. My name is Donatas Barkauskas. I'm a software engineer at EPAM. And I'll be talking about Liquibase and try to explain what it is, how to use it, why is it useful, what the hell is this Liquibase called. So yeah, well, we first need to start from like the basics. So what is schema migration? Basically, schema migration are updates to your existing schema. So as you can see, this is an example of like schema migrations. We can add, remove, or add constraints, whatever changes your schema migration. Your schema is called a schema migration. And so the question rises, kind of, why do you need this Liquibase? You kind of can do everything by hand, right? Well, yes, you can, but as changes rises, you will soon find it's hard to keep track with all of the changes in your database. There might be thousands of changes. And the only another topic that I need to touch is you can't even be sure how many changes were successful or how many were not. So it's quite difficult. And that's where Liquibase comes in. Well, what is Liquibase? In short, it's a powerful open source migration tool for databases. But the short version doesn't tell us a lot about Liquibase, right? So I'll try to explain a bit in the longer version, right? It helps you keep track of your changes, basically manages them, handles fails execution. It basically simplifies the whole process of like migration, schema migration. Another big feature that Liquibase provides us is automatic rollback operations, which basically means if you have a failed transaction or failed execution of some changes, it will automatically roll back those changes so you wouldn't get any funny business with your database. Well, there are different formats that Liquibase supports. One is SQL, the other is XML, JSON, and YAML. Each of them can be, some of the databases may use one flavor format, some of them use the other. In my personal experience, XML and SQL are the most popular ones. So, yeah. But you can use any of these flavors, except when you use NoSQL like MongoDB, you kind of need to use YAML. Let's go to the keywords to understand. First is changelog. Changelog is a list of change sets. Basically, it's a file that contains other files that are needed for Liquibase to execute those chain sets. What are those chain sets? Well, change sets contain the information you need to provide some kind of transaction to the database. So for like adding columns or creating a new table, whatever. And change types. Change types are the actual actions that you do in those change sets. I have, okay, also rollbacks, I'm sorry. Rollbacks is a reversion of the operation. I touched that previously, and basically that's pretty simple to understand. It just rollbacks your transactions, so to speak. To understand it visually, we can go through the hierarchy of change files. So basically, changelog contains multiple change sets. Change set contains multiple change types, which are actions. So basically, as you can see, the hierarchy goes from the bottom up. You can have multiple changes. You put them in a change set, and you put that change set in a changelog. I want to go in, before the demo starts, I want to go in a bit of a deeper look how to, what everything looks like, etc. So basically, in this demo, I'm using Spring Boot with Liquibase throughout this presentation. It's a simple REST API, it's nothing serious. But to get our Liquibase working, first we need to set up Spring Liquibase changelog, provide basically the path to our changelog that contains change sets, as mentioned previously. Also, we need a working database. So in my example, I'm using Postgres. So that's all simple stuff. You need to set up data source, URL, username, passwords, etc. Then we come to the changelog. Okay, there's a mouse. So basically, you see there's like a wrapper. If you use XML, you kind of need this wrapper for everything to work correctly. So include this wrapper. And you see I included a single change set in the changelog that I created. So that's how you include change sets in your changelog. But you can also use this, include all, which is basically you provide the directory and include all of the change sets that are in that directory. I probably wouldn't use it and wouldn't recommend using it, since including just simple files is a better way to keep track of the changes you made before. Okay, and let's go into the change set. And this is an example of change set. As you can see, this is the wrapper that we need to include in all XML files. And this is basically the change set, the changes that we make. We need to provide author, ID. ID is, you can have it any way you want, but in my case, in this example, I used 1, basically an integer. In practice, in like production environments, you just use your task number. It would be it would be linked to the task itself. So it would be like easier to research if you forgot what the changes were, why the changes were made, etc. Yeah. Then you open up with create table. All of this you can do with tags, basically. It converts to SQL later. You create a table with persons, and then you create some columns. One is name without any constraints, and the other is ID with some constraints like nullable, primary key, unique, etc. So yeah, those are a couple of files you need to set up to have your first change set executed. I kind of want to demonstrate how to set everything up, so we can go to our demo.
Yeah, and while Donatas is resharing his idea, I will jump in with a minute of our commercial. As always, I remind you that we have launched a free Java school that goes from the very basics of Java, of writing your first main methods, and up to modern technologies like cloud, CI/CD, even modern UI. So if you're interested, feel free to enroll on mjc.school. Yeah, it's totally free and totally online. Okay, Donatas, I'm passing the word back to you.
Okay, so it's simple. Wait a second. Okay, so it's as simple as I said, the REST API, nothing too weird or complicated. You see, in resources, I created db.changelog. This is where our change logs and change sets are going to be living in. But first, we need to set up our Liquibase. This is a project without Liquibase, and I will set up from the ground up. So you could set up and test it at home. Okay, first we need a dependency. You can get that at Maven. It's called mavenrepository.com. You just type in Liquibase, select the newest version or the version you need, basically, and just paste it as a dependency. As you can see, there's a link to that dependency. And then you need to set up your plugin. If you plan on using Liquibase, you kind of need to set up this plugin. So we need to add some group ID. Then we need an app effect. The one with core doesn't work for us. We need a Maven plugin. And we add the version. My version, as you've seen previously, is 4.2. So we need to use 4.2. And we need to add some configurations. Because by default, Liquibase will look into Liquibase.properties file, which we don't have, as you can see. We have only application properties, and we want Liquibase to look at this application properties. So yeah, what we do is we set property file. We provide a path to it. We need basically from the root. And there are a couple of other configurations that we need. One is so it would identify this basically path and pick it up, not use the default one. So we set this property file will override to true. By default, it's false. And another one that we need if we plan on doing rollback operations that I will present also. We need a changelog file. We will include it in application properties, but we also need to include it here. But we don't have it now, so we can create one. Okay, as you can see, there's no wrapper, so we kind of need to pick it up. The wrapper can be picked up from this link. I will maybe paste it in the chat. Okay. I'll just paste it in the chat and maybe someone can pick it up. Okay, so just a second. I'm going to pick up the wrapper from the example, so I wouldn't have to type everything in. You will get a lot of inclusions that are unnecessary. You can remove them with a short by hand. Basically, I'm using a shortcut, Control Alt L and O. We also don't need those include files because they're dummy example include files. We're going to create a chain set and include it later. Okay. That's it for our changelog. Now we can include this file. As you see, we can use this one. And now if we do rollback operations, it will be able to pick up from this configuration and know where the changelog is, and like execute rollbacks for the chain set if we need. Okay. Now we go to application properties. I have my data source, username, password, everything set up for normal work for the REST API, but we kind of need to add a bit of more configuration. So first one is change. Basically, what I'm doing now is including the So what I'm doing here is including this file for Spring Liquibase to pick up. We also need to sync everything. This is one of the configurations we want to do. And the other is we need to set our URL, which is basically the same URL. We can just copy and paste it. And we need to set up username and so our username is user and the password is password. Okay, so we're done with the application.properties file. We just need to include our changelog, our database URL, username, and password. Now everything is almost set up. We need to create a change set. This number, as you can see, if you want to activate the rollback, basically enable the rollback operations, you need to provide some kind of ID, so it can be identified between all of the other change sets. Okay, as in my example in the theory before, as you can see, we need to include this basic wrapper also here. So for any XML file that you have in like the chain set, changelog, you kind of need to have this wrapper. And we can start creating our chain set. So chain set ID would be 1. The other would be units, so the matters. And now we can create. Oh, actually, before that, I will show you I'm using Docker to create a new instance of a database. So I'm going to just execute some Docker commands so it would run. Okay, it's running. Probably can't share. You only see this one. Okay. Okay, do that. Okay, so regarding the sham set, let's continue. I'm gonna show it later for you. We create a table name person. That's the same as an example. Create the name of ID, the type of integer, and add a couple of strings. So the first one would be nullable, false, unique, true, and primary key to true. We want this to be a primary key of ours. Okay. We can add another column that could be first name, of type varchar, okay. Our change set is ready to be executed, but we don't need to forget that we still need to include this. So we include our file, db, changelog, change set. Okay. Now, if we execute the program, if we launch it, basically what it will do is, since I have a basic REST API, I'm using JPA, so it will create one table, but it will also execute this. So it will create a person with ID and the constraints we added, and another column called first name. So let's check it out.
While it runs, I will jump in fast again. I saw the comments that asks why do we have to use Spring here. We don't actually need to use Spring with the Liquibase. It can be used like a simple Maven plugin with a CLI program or without even actual Java code. Just here, it is an example of Spring application, Spring Boot application that uses Liquibase, and the code will be in the description if you're watching it on the YouTube, and you can actually play around with the code yourself and see how the Liquibase interacts with the database.
Yeah. Sorry, I might have forgot to mention that. Yes, you can use. You don't need to be married to Java to use Liquibase. Liquibase is its own thing. You can use it without a code editor or with. It doesn't matter, because it mainly works on not like on Spring, not on Java, but on the database. So yeah. From the logs, you can see that it's trying to run my change set, which is this one. Create a table, ran successfully. So everything is executed successfully. Now, if I share another screen with this one, for example. As you can see, I ran Liquibase on like Docker. It ran everything. It is currently running. So let's check it out. I'm connecting to the database. It's nothing very hard to do. You just open your admin console, type in the name. It could be any name, and then type the host address. Since I'm using it locally, it's localhost, the port number, and the user. Since our user is named user, we use user. Okay. As you can see, there are 4 tables. One is from our REST API, and another one we just created with our Liquibase. We can check it out, what it has. As you can see, it has two columns, ID, first name. So it executed correctly. It's also primary key. And we have two tables that are not are made. What are they? So basically, they are a list of our changes. So as you can see, only one change that was executed, so it only has one entry. This is the ID I provided to the change set. This is my name that I also provided. This is the file's name. You can see it's of type executed. And this part is pretty important. So every change you make on a change set is recorded and hashed. And if you change something without changing the ID or name, basically, if you try to modify that already executed change set, you will get an error. So that's quite important to understand. As you can see, description is what basically it did, created a table with the name of person. Okay, now what if we wanted to, what if we got a task, another task, that asked us to add another column, which is last name. If you have a first name, you probably have a last name. So let's try to create it. And this time, I'm gonna use SQL to give you some variety. Disclaimer before I create it, it's not good practice to mix different types of change sets. Keep it simple and try to stick to the same format unless it's absolutely necessary. But in most cases, it's not. As you can see, the type is SQL, and I just incremented the ID. The best thing for SQL, in my opinion, is that you don't need to put in the like wrapper. You don't need this. All you need to do is just type. And that's it. You can start your change set. And you can do that by typing change set. And the format, how it works, you still need to provide the ID and author. And how it works, you provide author, you provide it like this. So in our case, it could be I incremented the ID. That's why it's good to use like task numbers, since you can kind of get lost in the ID incrementation by hand. Okay, and after that, we just use a simple SQL query. And what we'll do is add another part, which we will define how the rollback should be used. In simple queries just like this, it's not necessary because Liquibase knows how to roll back this. But as the queries become more complex, it's good practice to provide how to roll back your operation. And we can do that by doing -- rollback, alter table. and just drop column. Yes. Okay. What else? We also need to not forget to include our chain set. It's very important. I forget it quite often. Well, not quite often, but it happens. As you can see, there's some chain sets you can pick from. So we use the SQL one, the new one. And now when we run the application, we should be able to execute another chain set. Okay. As you can see, it's trying to execute my new chain set. As you can see, since this chain set was already executed in my database, it doesn't try to execute it again. It knows it was already executed and successful. So it just ran this one. As you can see, it ran successfully. Now, if we go to our database and refresh it, we see that we have more columns. We added last name. The type, as we provided, 255 varchar. Okay. And what if we want to check our database changelog? Did it add something? Well, yes, it did. It added our new entry with the ID of 2 and the author the same. As you can see, this time it's SQL. And okay. It's executed and has a different hash. So this hash is most of the time, it's probably going to be all the time unique. And if I change something, the hash will be different. And Liquibase will check all of the executed chain sets. And if you're trying to run an executed chain set with something changed, and the hash comes to the Liquibase different, you will get an error. So yeah, that's why if you want to change something, you create a new chain set. Okay. And probably that's all that I wanted to show you. We can go to questions.
Yeah, we have one question on the YouTube. The question is, can we create function or view using Liquibase?
That's a good question. I believe so. We can. Although I never created a view with a Liquibase, I believe it should.
Yeah,
it should be possible.
It is available, and when you creating a function, I used it only in XML. But when you create a function, you can specify the function code there, or you can point to the script file, .SQL file where the script resides. I hope it answers your question, and we have several bit more complex questions from the VR community chat. The first one, is it okay to use just the name for the author property, or is it recommended to use an email address?
Well, that depends. That depends on a lot of varying things. I never seen someone use email, but it basically should be identifying you as the author. So if you make the changes and the author is some other developer will come and read it and understand that it was you, you're kind of getting the job done. So yeah, it can be an email, although I'm not sure if I would recommend it myself personally. I would just use my first and last name. It would be more professional.
Well, I would probably disagree with you here, yeah, especially if you have a huge project with a lot of rotation. And yeah, for example, if a project communicates inside a big company in some internal messenger, there can be several people with the same name and surname. And if you post here an email, it's like not just your identifier, but an exact way to communicate with you and ask questions. But yeah, I think leaving just name is okay. Yeah, I would probably use email.
Yeah, now that you mention it, kind of makes sense to use email, unless okay.
Okay. The next question. What is your recommendation to maintain Liquibase changes in its own repository without mixing with the application code or together with the application code?
I would suggest keeping them with the application code. Since you're doing those changes on depends on the stack, depends what you're using, but it can go both ways. Although I would maybe couple them with the application.
Yeah, especially if you have lots of applications that use the databases, and if you create a separate repository for each of them, you will have not 50 but 100 repositories, and it's quite a lot. Okay, just a second. Is rollback something that happens automatically, or is it a manual thing?
Oh, I forgot to show you rollbacks. I forgot. It depends if if the changes while you execute them fail, so it happens then automatically, yes. But if you want to re-roll those changes, you can use you need to use distinct features of Liquibase to basically roll back. One of the features is by count. Uh, in Spring, you can use like open Maven command tab and execute a command like this. I'm not sure if I can chat. Can you forward the command?
Yeah, sure.
I wanted to show you. I actually forgot to show you this one. Sorry. But basically, yeah, if you open up, if you do everything step by step and you execute this command, it will roll back one change. As you can see, you provide count. You can provide multiple counts, like 1, 2, 3, if you have that many changes, and it will roll back the number of counts you enter.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what is the suggestion to conduct a migration with a Liquibase? The overall process, including the possibility of failure. So how would you do it?
Could you repeat the question?
What is your suggestion how to conduct a migration with the Liquibase? The overall process, including the possibility of failure.
How to connect or contact?
Yeah, I would say that if you want to make a migration with a Liquibase, you should definitely check it on the lower environments, and Liquibase allows it because, well, you can apply the same code, the same changes to the different databases on different environments, and if everything works on, I don't know, performance test environment, that it has higher probability of working on the production. And also, when we changed the database when the application was live, we also checked how the application interacts with dates during the migration. So we ran a performance test that just ran for an hour, and during this hour we migrated the database and see how many exceptions do we see and if we see any of them. And in my opinion, if your performance tests cover most of your real production cases, it's usually enough to be sure that nothing will fail. But we didn't have large volumes of data. It may be completely another situation. I cannot comment on it.
Yeah, so basically, you probably said everything that I would have said.
Okay, and I think the last question that we have in demo we touched DML comments, and what about data updates? Maybe huge data volumes. Does Liquibase support it?
Insertion, like insert big data? You mean like that? Or
Yeah, maybe not inserting, but updating.
well, you can update. You can insert data. I mean, you can update set data, remove it, delete it. You can basically all of the operations you can do in SQL, you can do in Liquibase. But the point of Liquibase is leaving a paper trail of your changes. So if a new developer comes or anything, it would be easier for them to understand what the changes were made from the original schema. So yes, you can. It would be still good practice to use Liquibase if you need to do a lot of changes to the schema, since it will leave a paper trail of your changes in the chainset file.
Yeah, and yeah, we've got another last question. Is it possible to use another kinds of databases, for example, NoSQL?
Yes, the one I'm familiar with is MongoDB. You can use MongoDB, but I'm not. I don't think you can use XML or SQL files. You need to use YAML from the information I gather.
Yeah, I haven't used it, but I think XML should work. It's like JSON and YAML. It can be converted. But yeah, Liquibase supports more than 50 databases. I think they tell on their website, and so there are several NoSQL databases there. Okay, I think that's all. Thanks, guys, for your great questions, and thanks a lot, Donatas, for a great presentation. The next week, unfortunately, we will not have Light Talk, so see you in 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone, and bye.
Thank you.